This is Middle Way Philosophy video number 2, Scepticism by Robert M. Ellis. It follows through the first of the principles given in video number 1, the introduction to Middle Way Philosophy, which was the principle of skepticism. Skepticism is most basically a recognition of the limitations of human embodiment. We are situated in time and space. We cannot see or hear everything. Our senses are limited, our brains are limited, thus our knowledge is also limited. We cannot know, indeed we have no certainty, given our embodied state, that we are not God. People often associate skepticism with negativity, with denial, with saying no. But this is a misunderstanding of skeptical arguments. It probably arises because no is ambiguous. Somebody who says no to a particular claim made by somebody else may be asserting the opposite, or they may simply be failing to accept the claim that's being made. They may be just as rejecting of the opposite claim, and that is the implication of skepticism. So skepticism is not denialist and should not be confused with denialism. So let's look at some example skeptical arguments. Here's a simple one that comes from Descartes. If I see a tower on the horizon, I cannot tell whether that tower is round or square. In other words, my perception is ambiguous. That can apply to all our perceptions, indeed, everything that we get through our senses. In other words, even if we were to look more closely, we would still find that our perceptions are ambiguous in relation to reality. We cannot find out what is actually ultimately the case. There is always some doubt about it. We also have a strong tendency to impose our own stories on what we perceive. Who, when they saw a cloud formation like this, could resist saying that they saw an angel? Not surprisingly, many of the people who did believed that they saw an angel. But we need to acknowledge that the angel is our story. It's no less an angel for that, but it's also a cloud formation. Another example of a skeptical argument is the one known as the dream argument. How do you know that you're not dreaming right now? How do you know that when you experienced waking up and getting up this morning, you weren't dreaming that you got up this morning? In other words, how do we know that what we experience, what we take to be reality, might not be unreal? Of course, we don't definitely know that it is unreal. We just always have grounds for doubt. We don't know for sure that it is real. Another example of skeptical argument is the infinite regression of explanation. This kind of argument can apply to any kind of claim, even, for example, a mathematical claim. Supposing somebody claims that a certain statement is true, whether that's the bus is red or 2 + 2 = 4. You can always ask, well, why is that true? How do you know? How can you justify that? The person who believes that claim may then give you an explanation or a justification. We don't need to go into what that is, because whatever that justification is, you can always ask for a justification of the justification, and then a justification of the justification of the justification. There's apparently no end to the infinite regression of whys that we can continue to ask. This again is an indicator of uncertainty, of open-ended uncertainty. The implications of skeptical arguments have been widely misunderstood by philosophers through the centuries. Skeptical arguments basically only assert that any given belief, X belief, may be wrong, not that it definitely is wrong. Nevertheless, many of the objections of philosophers and of others, and many everyday rejections of skeptical argument, often involve the assumption in some way or another that skeptics are making a definite claim or a negative claim of some kind, that X beliefs are wrong. What does it mean to say that a particular belief may be wrong? Well, skeptics are very often raising what amounts to possibilities or very small probabilities. So what does it mean, for example, to say that you may be dreaming at this moment? Well, another way of putting that is that there's a very, very, very small possibility that you may be dreaming at this moment. You could compare that to the chances that there's an aardvark hiding in your house, one that you haven't noticed yet. Well, maybe there's a very, very small chance that such an aardvark exists, or such an aardvark is indeed hiding in your house and you didn't know about it. It's not a probability that you need to take very seriously. You don't need to change your habits because of it. It is negligible in practical terms, but nevertheless, it's a possibility and we need to take it seriously. Given this small chance of unknown unknowns, then, skepticism is not something that needs to be refuted. Scepticism instead needs to be a cue for provisionality. What is provisionality? Well, it's a psychological state, not, as philosophers have often assumed, a claim of some kind. We need to make ourselves, our habits and our judgments, more provisional if we're to be adequate to what skepticism is telling us. If we're more provisional, then we have more alternatives available to us. It's not absolutely unthinkable that those highly improbable alternatives might be the case. We have them at least available to us in our imaginations. The imagination becomes very important if we take skepticism seriously. If you're provisional, you're also aware of the limitations of the particular set of views you may have. The fact, in effect, that they may be false, that it's possible that they may be false. Finally, provisionality is something that can be cultivated. It's not something that you either have or don't have. It's something we can work on through practice. If we are to recognise the uncertainty of our beliefs in practice, then we need to avoid absolute beliefs, whether those beliefs are absolutely positive or absolutely negative. Scepticism thus implies the middle way, which is an interesting difficulty in relation to the attitudes that philosophers and Western society generally have often taken towards scepticism. They have often completely wrongly assumed that scepticism in some way is extreme. But on the contrary, scepticism cannot be extreme. Scepticism, just by the implication of skeptical argument, is the middle way. It's finding ourselves in a messy, uncertain middle point, somewhere between those absolutes, whether they're negative or positive.